Today, more than ever, diversity, equity, and inclusion are important discussions that also offer opportunities to make meaningful changes. We discuss how one local health system is doing just that. It's all here on the next Latino Motion. Join us.
Choose to get lost in the woods to gain experience in forest management.
Choose to travel through time to understand the past.
Choose to soar to pursue a career in dance.
Stockton University offers 50 high-quality academic programs, small class sizes, and affordable tuition. Choose to match your interests and talents at one of New Jersey's nationally ranked universities.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation, and Stockton University. This edition of Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is brought to you by the HD Studios at the campus of Stockton University. Funding for Latino Motion is provided by AtlantiCare, a member of Geisinger. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world, and South Jersey Gas.
Health disparities in the Hispanic community is a major concern for us here at Latino Motion and ALMA and AtlantiCare Employee Resource Group. That is why we are partnering to present this health segment. Tu salud es importante para nosotros.
Welcome to Latino Motion, a weekly interview show highlighting issues impacting New Jersey's Latino community while advancing understanding of Latino cultural heritage and contributions to our society. And here is your host, Bert Lopez.
Buenos dias and welcome to Latino Motion. In today's environment, diversity, equity, and inclusion are important discussions and offers opportunities to make meaningful changes. I'm happy to have Charisse Pfizer, who is the new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at AtlantiCare. Charisse, welcome to Latino Motion.
Thank you, Bert.
It's a pleasure to have you here. You have a very important role and certainly very timely role. Tell me why AtlantiCare has gone in this direction, naming you as the new director in this work.
AtlantiCare has had a long history of diversity, equity, and inclusion work, but never formalized to this point. So we just feel with today's climate, social climate, a lot of discussion about social injustices, that this is time to make a bold move and put infrastructure around this work. Our goal at AtlantiCare is, of course, to make a difference. And so that is my plan, is to make a difference.
And just in full disclosure, I'm a board member at AtlantiCare, and I know that AtlantiCare has worked in this area for many, many years. Now, putting this structure together, what does that mean for you, Charisse, in terms of being named the director, and what's going to be different going forward?
So first of all, let me just share, I am also still Vice President for Clinical Services at AtlantiCare. The Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer role is part of the infrastructure, and I will be putting together a formal infrastructure that includes leaders from across the organizations as well as staff from across the organization to make sure that we're meeting not only the needs of our workforce, but meeting the needs of the community. So I will put together opportunities for us to have listening posts that will allow staff to actually voice some of their concerns. That's just an example of one thing that we will be doing. The first big activity that we have planned is around education. We want to make sure that we do education on unconscious bias, implicit bias, making sure that we understand and everyone's level set as to where they're personally, where they're coming from, so that when they make decisions that they keep that in mind.
Now, obviously, the role of AtlantiCare for making healthy communities means that this extends beyond the employees out in the community as well.
Yes. So our mission has always been to build healthy communities, and we want to make sure that we are have the data to support that we have not had any what I would call care disparities for any reason. And so we will be collecting data that will support where we need to go in terms of opportunities that we see in that data. So we're going to do some work, we're just going to do some work around gathering information about the patients we serve, and then serve that up and comb through the data to make sure that we don't find, hidden information underneath that says that we need to go in one direction, where in the past we were going in another direction.
Yeah, very, very important work, and we're going to cover a little bit on health disparities in a few. But I know that this work is not new for AtlantiCare. It's not new for you, and you have a passion around this work. Tell me a little more about that and a little bit about your background.
So I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for 30 plus years. I could say more, but I'm going to stop there. And I think because I have a clinical background, it gives me a different perspective and a different view on how I approach all of this information. I've been at AtlantiCare for 15 years. It'll be exactly 15 years in November. And I have been the executive sponsor for our African American Employee Resource Group in that entirety. I have a special place in my heart for homeless youth. So I've spent the entire time that I've been in Atlantic City area sleeping out for the homeless youth that are at the Covenant House. So I spend my pastime, that is where I draw strength from. And then of course, I also have a special place in my heart for the elderly. And so as people age, they tend to lose some of that independence. And so I work hard with trying to make sure that we hear them, we understand them. So it's not just the traditional diversity around race and ethnicity. It's also around other marginalized groups.
Now, you mentioned the fact that you still have two roles, right? You have your primary role as a vice president in the clinical, and you're also doing this work as the diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. It must not be, it's not easy, what I'm trying to say. It's not easy work. You have to really work with across the board. Tell me how you think you're going to be able to accomplish that.
I think that I'm going to build, try to build on the foundation that was already laid before me. So we've always had employee resource groups. In fact, we're now up to 10 employee resource groups. And so they will be my sounding board. They will make sure that the work that we're doing actually meets the needs that we've identified. And we've put together a council, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. That group will be a steering committee that sort of directs where we go. I'm trying to work with my colleagues to make sure that all of the programs that we implement, that it is very important that we make sure that all the programs we implement, we have thoughtful processes about how do we assess that we're opening these programs for everyone.
Now, I know that you have full support of the administrative team there. Tell me a little bit about how this has been received by employees in your organization.
Well, so far it's been overwhelmingly supportive. I've worked at AtlantiCare, as I shared, for 15 years. And so I've built up, I believe, some credibility with not only the administration, but also with staff. And so I have always been one of those leaders that make sure I walk the halls, make sure I talk to employees, make sure I'm engaging employees no matter where they work. I try hard to know as many employees by name as possible, and not just their names, but also, something about their families. And so that's important to me.
We want to talk a little bit about some of the scope of the work that you're planning in the future, and also talk about what's taking place in terms of your engagement outside in the community as an organization. in this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics.
Welcome back to Latino Motion. I'm happy to have Cherise Pfizer. She is the new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer of AtlantiCare. And Cherise, we were talking about the great work that you're doing there at AtlantiCare. I want to focus about some of the initiatives that you are planning to have. And before we get into that, I know most companies are focused on diversity and inclusion, and now this new piece on equity. What does that really mean?
So we felt it was important to add the word equity because equity, of course, in this particular case, does not mean equality. It really means that the person who is working for you, or the patient who's receiving services, that they feel like they're being treated fairly, that they feel like they're getting whatever they need to be level with the rest of the environment or the rest of the population. So our goal is to make sure that not only do we have a mindset of making sure that we're having a diverse group of people that we're working with, a diverse group of people that we care for, but everything that we do is also equitable.
Yeah, very good. And I know it's not just about having a diversity program, but not having a pathway, if you will, for people
Correct.
to take advantage of that and having that equity. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the ERGs, the employee resource groups. And I know I worked a great deal with ALMA. ALMA is the Hispanic group that has helped with our show here, help to get guests and cover health topics for the Hispanic community. What are some of the other programs, initiatives that you're undertaking?
So we have, other than ALMA, we have 9 other employee resource groups. And so one of the things we're doing that's a little different is that we've decided to also make what we call we have goals every year, as most organizations do. And the goals that we feel are very important, we call them big dot goals. So in this particular case, we're going to embark upon one of our big dot goals being to foster an inclusive climate and culture at AtlantiCare. And so that goal, using our employee resource group, will be tied through every task or every program that they take on. So we have resource groups that deal with people who have who either have a relative or some connection to someone who is battling addiction. It's called HOPE. We have the Asian Pacific resource group. We have Pride. We have Legacy, as I mentioned before. We also have Balance, which is a group that's focused on making sure that the employees include things for themselves, like exercise, mindfulness, making sure that they include that into their workday. The work we do, of course, is very hard. We also have HOPE, and we have CARES, and that's not all of them, but I'm trying to remember everyone that we have. And we, of course, have HEROES, which is the veterans group. And so we're trying to have a thread that goes through all of the employee resource groups that they work together on as a goal that will help us achieve the overall goal of it, at AtlantiCare. So we're actually, go ahead, I'm sorry.
A lot of that is really the top up or the bottom up, so to speak,
Yes.
right? Engaging employees. Tell me a little bit about what's taking place on the top in terms of drilling down this environment of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So from a board perspective, I'm laying out the plan with the board, the system board, and making sure that they are supportive of the plans that we have so that we can, every program or project that we put through, that we know that we have the support of the highest level in the organization. And I report directly to Lori Herndon, who is our Chief Executive Officer. And in terms of what we're doing to make sure that the executive team is also aware and supporting this work, that training that I talked about in terms of implicit bias training or unconscious bias training, we want to start with the executive team and the board members to make sure they understand what bias means. And so if you have to make a decision about the community, if you have to make a decision about care, that you're using that as your filter.
We probably don't have enough time in this segment to cover the patient aspect of this, but let's just get into that a little bit. How does this carry over to the patient side?
So we would like for every provider, ideally patients would like to receive care from people who look like them, sound like them, or people they could understand and relate to. So we want to make sure that we have not only given access to everyone, but we've made access available in such a way that they understand everything that's being asked of them. So we make sure, and most hospitals do this. In fact, I don't know of any hospital that doesn't have a way to communicate to individuals who have English as a second language. But it's not just the communication of what's going on with them, it's also understanding their culture. So it's understanding how a patient of one culture may not, be okay with having a male provider, or may not be okay with, actually speaking directly to an individual. They may want to do that through someone else, like a spouse. So we want to make sure that we're creating an environment where patients, no matter what their background is, that they can actually heal in that environment.
We know how important during this particular crisis of COVID,
yes,
for many families, losing that connection when someone's hospitalized. I know you've been able to overcome some of that through some virtual conferencing. Tell me a little bit about that.
So in most cases, we have the ability, I think in every case, we actually have the ability to use iPads to communicate back to patients' families. It's extremely hard, though, even if you're doing a visual Zoom call with your family or FaceTime with your family, for people who are used to having that social connection and the isolation of being in the hospital, they're depending on the caregivers, like the nurses, particularly, the support staff, particularly, to spend time with them. And so they are becoming the family for the patients that we have there. But we have to increase our communication to the families to make sure they understand that their loved one is okay, to make sure that they understand exactly what's going on, what the care plan is, when the physician will be around so that they can communicate with the physician. So I think that while we have technology, it doesn't take the place of, actually being able to touch the patient. So the nurses step in that regard. They become the family. We also want to make sure that we are communicating in a way that the patient will receive that as helpful as well.
Yeah, and that's important. Understanding the need for that is critical. We're going to take a quick break. We'll finish off with the third segment. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. I'm happy to have once again Charisse Pfizer, who is the new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at AtlantiCare. And Charisse, we talked about all the great work and focus on the employees, the focus on the patients, and what all that means, and how all that drives towards a healthy community. But let's talk about the community and some of how this work carries out into the community and some of the initiatives you may have.
Thank you, Bert. So, as I stated before, AtlantiCare has had a long history in the community as well, working as partners. What we would like to do in the near future, and what's part of our plan, is that we would like to work with all the big employers in Atlantic City we would like to be the anchor organization and the convener of big employers to support the needs of the community. Some of those needs may be not just creating jobs, but creating job readiness for people who are seeking jobs. So the goal would be that we would, work together with those partners who have a like mind regarding this work and wanting to sustain the community long term. So it's not okay to just, come here and get a job and then leave, or graduate from high school and leave. We would want to create Atlantic City as a place where people want to stay, sustain, and grow. And so in order to do that, you have to have a job that allows you to be able to, meet your household needs. There are several things that we're doing already. We take our community needs assessment that is done annually. We take that data and we actually put plans together to meet the needs of the community based on that.
The whole idea here is addressing the needs in the community. And I know that in the past you've had meetings with the Latino community, with Asian community, African American community, to get a full scope of some of the needs and also address some of the health disparities that exist. Is that part of the work that you're going to continue to do?
Absolutely. We listen to the voice of the customer in everything that we do, including we make sure that we have focus groups that are usually variety of focus groups depending on what we're trying to do. We want to make sure we hit where people live. So if we were doing something in Atlantic City, we want to make sure that the people that we're talking to are people who live in Atlantic City. And so we've had focus groups based on the different ethnicity and races before. We hope to expand that to be more focused on whatever program we're putting together. And so that's where we plan to head in the direction we plan to go with this work.
Now, in addition to the social environment, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion is so critical. We also are in the midst of a COVID crisis, which has also shown us that the inequities in healthcare in terms of the majority, or there's a more likelihood of either Latino, African American to get COVID. Those are some of the inequities that exist, disparities, if you will, in terms of healthcare. Do you feel that AtlantiCare could be a big player in addressing some of those issues and concerns?
Yeah, actually, I believe that we could be more transparent with that data. I know that nationally, it has the data has shown that African Americans and Hispanics, Latina, have either acquired COVID, but also had more adverse outcomes from it. Now, our data, we've actually cut the data in the way that we could figure that out, and we have found that that is not the case for the patients we're seeing. The majority of the patients that we are seeing are not African American and Latina. But we do know that that's an issue because, as you know, we still have the farmers in Hamilton that come, and those are migrant workers that typically come for a short amount of time. We did have a spike in that community, but then we were able to put some resources in place to try to deal with that particular community, which is very different than any other population.
You also have a pocket out in the community in terms of addictions in terms of homelessness. And those are some of the areas that I know that AtlantiCare has also been addressing. Tell me more about what are some of those initiatives.
So at our HealthPlex facility, we have taken the initiative of really trying to be sure that we are the test site for those individuals who are either homeless or who have some addiction issue. We want to make sure that they're getting the proper tests so that they can understand, whether they're positive or negative. And even though they're homeless and their situation may not be ideal for not being able to cohort themselves from other or isolate themselves from other individuals, we still want to make sure that we are able to meet those patients where they are. So the goal is to actually meet all the patients wherever they are in the community. We've set up several test sites around in our primary service area, which is Atlantic County, and then we've set up some in our secondary service areas as well.
So you mentioned AtlantiCare becoming a major institution in terms of a hub for the community. And I know that you've reached out and working with a number of organizations such as the Boys and Girls Club. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So we've set up a what we call a science room in the Boys and Girls Club. We're currently working on a curriculum that would be something that we can invest in from at an early age. So the children there start at age 13. They're typically 13 to 17. And we feel like if we can get them interested and excited about the sciences early on, that would be the seed that we could then nurture and grow to become our future pharmacists, to become our future doctors and nurses, laboratorians. And so we want to start that process now. We want to keep them engaged, support them in the way of, once they've turned 18, jobs that will allow them to get tuition reimbursement for whatever field they want to go into. So we are looking forward to that program growing. We're looking forward to that partnership. And we're, during COVID, we've also partnered with the casinos, and we're partnering with the school systems to make sure that we have set up a safe place for people to come and enjoy themselves, and for children, for them to get tested if they need to get tested.
Now, I recall that you had a program for healthy eating. We have obesity. That's a big issue, particularly within our minority community. And I know that you've also been in the schools addressing some of those issues.
Yes, we have. And during COVID, it made it even more difficult because the need didn't go away just because we could not, bring people into the environment. So we had to be creative and come up with a way of how are we going to make sure that the children are fed on a regular basis.
This is great work, and wish you a lot of success. And as always, I'm available to help in any way I can, because I truly believe in the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, so vital, not only for your organization, but for our community. Thank you so much for joining us here on Latino Motion, and thank you for joining us at home once again on Latino Motion. We'll see you next time.
Choose to get your feet wet, to learn more about protecting our environment. Choose to read minds, to understand the human brain.
Choose to get your hands dirty, to create a masterpiece.
Stockton University offers 50 high-quality academic programs, small class sizes, and affordable tuition. Choose to match your interests and talents at one of New Jersey's nationally ranked universities.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by AtlantiCare, a member of Geisinger, Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world, and South Jersey Gas.